Hi everyone, and welcome to Worth the Calories. I'm Matthew.
And I'm Catherine.
And this week we're talking bread.
Bread week! Yay!
Because at this point we are now very full of lots and lots of Italian breads.
Yeah, this was bread weekend.
It really was. So yes, we are back baking again. We have a bit of time back in our lives, so we are attempting some of the challenges along with the show. So we will be talking about them as we go through. So bread week going into it, we started with Focaccia.
I was so excited to do this. For ages, I've wanted to try Focaccia because I love Focaccia. Do you know, I was thinking, why was it I wanted to try Focaccia so much? I think I just wanted to do the bit where you stuck your fingers in the dough. But yes, very excited to try Focaccia. So I did Lizzie's Truffle Focaccia because also I love truffle. Yeah. It was really delicious.
Yeah.
It was also really straightforward, but I would say it was one of those recipes where you have to keep the faith.
Okay, in what way?
Well, the dough was like the stickiest bread dough I've ever encountered in my life.
Okay.
So you do the kneading in the stand mixer with the hook. And initially I was like, initially I was worried that it wasn't going to incorporate all the flour.
Okay.
So I did do a little bit of scraping flour down the sides with a spatula.
Yep.
But it did. But then after that, once you were put it on to it was 5 minutes on a medium speed, it was kind of all incorporated, but it wasn't forming a sort of dough ball in the way that I've seen with other doughs.
Right.
I was a bit worried what I was going to find when I pulled it out of the bowl because the bottom bit of the dough was still very much wedded to the bottom of the stand mixer.
Okay.
I think it must have kneaded sufficiently because, I mean, it all came out quite well. But that's what I mean by sort of keeping the faith. I was like, I'm not going to try and insert my amateur knowledge into this. I'm just going to do what it tells me in the recipe. But yeah, no, it all seemed to work out. You then had to prove it in a you were supposed to shape it into a ball. I did turn it out onto the breadboard. I was like, there's no shaping this mess. Right. So I then just put it into the greased bowl. I wish I'd just flipped it straight into the greased bowl, if I'm honest, because I think we lost a bit of the dough in it getting stuck to the breadboard. But it proved really nicely. The airing cupboard, where our water tank is, once again, has proven to be the proving location of choice in our house. So yeah, the airing cupboard was a discovery when I tried a tear and share loaf from Ocado magazine or somewhere like that. And I thought, let's try it in here, clear it a shelf, and it worked amazingly well. Worked amazingly well for the focaccia as well. You prove it once, you stretch it out in the pan, prove it again, and then only at the end
you prove it in the pan.
Prove it in the pan. Okay. So the second prove is in the pan, stretched out into the rectangle. And then at the end, you sort of tip over your garlic steeped olive oil, do the sticking your fingers in the hole bit, which I really wanted to do, and then put like the truffle slices and the truffle salt and things like that on the top. Okay. Keep the faith.
Can I ask a couple of questions?
Please do.
At what point do you incorporate oil into it?
So the truffle oil was in with the flour and the water at the very beginning.
Okay, so it makes up part of the moist content.
Makes up part of the moisture content right at the very start. It wasn't huge amounts, but yes, that was in there from the very start. And then, of course, there was a lot of oil in terms of greasing the pan. And then there was about 60 millilitres of oil that I did with the garlic to make the garlic oil, and that was sort of poured over at the end.
Because focaccia is quite an oily bread. I wasn't sure whether it was you sort of drizzle over at the point of baking or something. Or
I think a bit of both. I didn't find this focaccia as oily as the focaccia that I'm used to having. Yeah,
we have had it much oilier from restaurants and places.
Shops.
Yeah. I didn't miss the excess of oil on your hands at the end of it and so on.
Yeah, and the same. I think this was, because it was perfectly tasty. I do think I probably ever so slightly underbaked it.
Okay.
Because to me, focaccia involves a crispiness to the outside. Okay. And the edges had that. But when I tipped it out of the pan, I think the bottom in the middle, the middle of the bottom, of the middle, the middle of the bottom, was not as crispy as I would have wanted it to be.
Okay, I got
so
it.
I wonder if maybe 2 or 3 more minutes in the oven would have helped with that.
Okay, so my other question was, the pan that you used for it was a tray, a large
Yes.
tray that we use for tray bakes and things. Was it meant to be on that, or is it meant to be on just a flat tray?
It's meant to be on a tray that's at least 4 centimeters deep.
Okay, so it is baked in shape.
It's baked in shape.
Okay.
It's because it's still quite a wet dough even at the very end after the proving. So I think it does need to be baked in shape. I don't know how well it would hold its shape, or whether you'd end up with very flat tapered edges if you don't have a tray for it. Whether that was exactly the right size tray, I actually couldn't tell you because I just bother measuring. I was like, it looks all right.
It's rectangle and stuff, isn't it?
Rectangle and stuff. It looks roughly okay. I think it was approximately the right size.
Good. Okay.
But yeah, it was good. We'll have to have more.
I thought it was very good. I thought it was delicious, as a focaccia on its own. I think it will work very well in the way we like it, paired with some cheese, some ham, some sort of dip thing. Yeah, it's really, really good.
Yeah. Well, we've still got a jar of black truffle slices and some truffle oil and some truffle salt. So you're going to be eating that a lot until we've run out.
Because so much of it was using the dough hook, so it's not so manual, and then prove it and wait, and then bake. It doesn't have the hands-on that some of the other stuff we've done. When we come to ciabatta, it's quite hands-on, so...
Yeah, no, it really was a relatively straightforward thing.
Nice.
And I would say it was not labour intensive, but you just need to be around that day to sort of whip it out of the airing cupboard and do the next step after the prove. It's not something that you can sort of set going and then not worry about it for a while.
Other proving spaces are available.
Yeah, I suppose. Yes, no. I acknowledge not everyone has an airing cupboard, or may even know what an airing cupboard is.
Or people actually have proving drawers or hot spaces in the house they can...
This is true, yes. Yeah, if we... As and when we get a new oven, if it has a proving drawer, the airing cupboard may return to being used purely for towels and sheets.
Because part of the thing, and this is going to be way more in depth than anyone listening really wants to know, but our house is quite open, so there's no one space that gets to a good temperature for proving. So
no, maybe the utility room, which is full of glass on a sunny day.
Yeah. Not in October.
No.
Was that the one, watching the show, let's talk about the show itself. Was that the one that you thought, that would be a good one to make? Were there any of the others that really stood out to you?
So that one I was very keen on because it's been a while since I've had truffle.
Okay.
One day we'll go to Tuscany again.
Yeah. Yes. Bring back international travel.
Yeah, exactly. The other one I also fancied, which is the other recipe on the website, was the one with halloumi, because I am a bit obsessed with halloumi. I quite liked a lot of them. What I also think is I might like to try my own combination of extra ingredients.
Okay.
Because I think once you've got, but I just want to do like a proper breakfast one.
Right.
With bacon.
Okay.
I feel like bacon in focaccia.
Not Weetabix and egg.
Gross.
But yeah, bacon would be nice.
Some bacon in there. I just
maybe get when you get really small bits of bacon that you fry up so they're really crispy.
Exactly. Pancetta?
Yeah, the name of which now escapes me.
Yeah, pancetta. Yeah. I think it's good.
Okay.
But yes, which of the ones that the contestants made was the one that made you go, "Whoa, I'd like to eat that"?
I think the truffle one, because I do feel like focaccia doesn't need lots of stuff in it. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of bread with lots of stuff in it at the best of times, because this is a very flavourful bread. And in fact, the last question then for you is, did you add salt to the top of it or anything?
I did, but probably not enough.
Okay.
For my taste.
Yeah, because that's the other thing I think of it is it's an oily bread with salt crystals on top, so it has a punch of, that sort of bread oil salt flavour, obviously, that you then pair with, I'm going to dip it in some hummus or some sort of creamy dip or something like that.
If I was going to make it again, because I bought some truffle salt, because that's what it said in the recipe, but actually the truffle salt that I bought was very fine.
Okay.
And I was a bit nervous about putting too much on the top, because I thought it might sort of soak in and then be overly salty. So what I might do is get some more of those, I think there's molten salt flakes that I used to use.
Yeah, that's the sort of thing I think of going on there.
And I think that on the top would add something. Yeah.
But yeah, those are the ones that appeal to me, where they started incorporating other things. I'm like, this doesn't feel like now it's a bread in the same way or a focaccia in the same way.
I feel like cherry tomatoes in those focaccias are basically just a trap waiting for me to ruin my clothing whilst I'm eating it. That's kind of my feeling about cherry tomatoes baked into bread products.
And also that, if we're talking moisture content and stuff, putting tomato in anything, big risk on how it's going to turn out.
Absolutely. So, yeah. Well done, the contestants. I don't think any of them were rubbish.
No.
I thought they were all I'd have happily eaten any of them.
Yeah, flavours hit or miss, and some of the baking process hit or miss, but by and large, they came out of it okay. No one stood out at that stage of it. No. Pretty much. Because the technical was ciabattas.
Tell me about the ciabattas. I've eaten them. Delicious. But tell me about the making of them.
Ciabatta, they're called ciabatta breadsticks. They're a bit more like ciabatta baguettes or slender baguette. I don't know if there's a term for slender baguette, but that's effectively what they are. Partially because I think of breadstick as a pastry thing.
Yeah, or certainly I think of it as something that's harder and thinner.
Yeah. So, anyway. Very, very similar. I think a slightly wetter dough. But you mix in the water, but only 2/3 of the water, and then you add more water as it's going gradually. And it did get really wet, so you had to sort of add it bit by bit, let it soak it in, and then add the next bit and so on.
Right.
And knead it for quite a while. I don't think I needed it for quite as long as the rest of them.
So did you knead it with your hand? Or
No, I did it with a dough hook.
Okay.
And there was one point, I had to use a scraper because it had sort of separated a layer that had gone smooth on the outside. I'm like, actually, that's a fair chunk of dough. So I, scraped it back in, and that worked okay.
Yeah.
Skipping ahead to the end, I don't think it's as aerated. The air bubbles aren't as big as I would expect from a ciabatta.
Right.
So I think some of that comes from the kneading, because it proved really well.
Yeah,
over an hour and a half, it definitely doubled in size. It got to the size of the bowl, so I had to take it out at that point. I couldn't leave it any longer.
It became a bit of a monster.
Yeah, whether I should have had a bigger bowl to let it prove even more. Maybe that's some of the thing to allow it to develop even bigger bubbles. But then you put it in a rectangle and then slice it. And you're slicing a very wet dough. So you're having to sort of slice and tear at the same time. But in pulling it into a rectangle, I think I pulled my rectangle too big.
Right.
Because actually the middle got very thin. Okay. So I sort of brought the rectangle back a little bit so that it wasn't. But there was so much ingredients.
Right.
Putting aside that I'm not a huge fan of bread filled with stuff, this, when it was a dough, felt like it was more stuff than dough.
Yeah.
Which was really strange. And particularly because I had fewer olives in there than
if you had the full amount of olives,
right?
There would have been more olive than bread.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know whether it's, the bowl wasn't big enough to prove in, didn't prove for long enough, lost some air at that stage. And then, you shape it into baguette shapes. Although, I think the recipe that we've been given tells us to put it in more baguette shapes than they did on the show.
Right.
So they had more dough per baguette, effectively.
Okay.
But you shape it, and then you put them in proving bags, and you give them another sort of 15, 20 minutes. They didn't seem to change at that point that I noticed.
Okay.
Who knows? Who knows whether they're supposed to or not? But you prove again. But at that point, they've had a lot of handling and slicing and so on. So I'm not sure that proof does a huge amount to them. Maybe it's just about resting them. And then you bung them in the oven at a very high heat for 15 minutes. I had to leave them in for longer because obviously I was putting 3 trays in at once that baked to better or lesser degrees. So I think there's also a thing of you're putting lots of cooler stuff in. So it cools down the oven, so you need to keep it really quite hot to cook them through. I had some of them came out a bit like Rashika's where some of the cheese had cooked out. Because again, it felt like there was so many ingredients. Some of the cheese was on top, so it sort of cooks over and you get the very crispy cheese bits, which I think went down quite well.
I was not averse to helping you deal with the crispy cheese bits.
But I think it tastes like ciabatta in terms of crispy outer, softer inner. Not as airy. But it's quite nice because it's cheesy and salty olives.
I thought it was delicious. I thought it matched with tzatziki really nicely. To be honest, I preferred it to normal ciabatta Because sometimes, I mean, I like the flavour of ciabatta, but sometimes the very, very crusty outer of ciabatta cuts up the inside of my mouth.
Agreed.
And this had a crisp, but it wasn't like, I'm going to slice it to the roof of my mouth on this type crispiness.
In my head, ciabatta goes dry really quickly. So, you're sort of eating it and you're going, this is actually slightly dissatisfying bread.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the benefit of this, because it's quite closer.
That's good.
It's tasty bread with cheese and olives and onion with a dip.
There might be some of it coming to work with me tomorrow.
Well, exactly. Like, there's nothing not to like here.
Yeah.
The big thing for me compared to the contestants was I wasn't under time pressure. And I can absolutely see how they came out not as well.
Yeah.
If you are rushed for that final bake. Because I could just leave them in until I decided, they look good enough to come out now.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if you are, you've got a hard stop and they've only been in for 10 or even 15 minutes and they've not baked enough for whatever reason.
And that seemed to be the main complaint
with
the breadsticks that the contestants produced.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I think is a bit harsh, as ever.
Yeah.
They're sort of... It's the time pressure that gets them. And I mean, I guess that's just the thing of the technical. But, they're making that trade-off between length of prove and length of bake. Yeah.
It was interesting watching the judging for the technical, because there was only one, I think Amanda's, the way she'd sort of stretched it, the top of it actually looked like, I would look at that and go, oh yes, that's ciabatta.
Right.
Whereas the rest of them did look like a sort of loaf more than anything. So I don't know whether they all ended, because they made lots of comments about quite dense and, not got the air pockets and so on. So, do they all lose it because they have so much handling in the middle of them? But there were a few mistakes at this point. You could start seeing people coming out. So Rashika didn't put her oven on the right temperature, I think.
Right.
I think there's definitely a moment where she goes, oh yeah, now it's on bread 220. That seemed to be turning the oven up.
Right.
Maggie forgot to put onion in hers.
Yep.
And Christelle decided to bake it for less, because she decided to prove it for longer. And like I say, the prove didn't seem to do anything at that stage. Yeah. It's a short prove and a very hot bake.
Interesting.
Okay.
Happy to have made them?
Yeah, I think so. It's one of those things that I probably wouldn't have made ever otherwise.
Yeah.
But it was an interesting thing. It wasn't too intensive. It was a little bit because you have to get all the bread kneading and so on, and then you're chopping up lots of different, chopping up onion and the olives. The instructions said half olives. Like, slice them in half.
Okay.
Whereas he made a comment on the thing of saying, oh, it's great to see them whole. One way or the other, Paul.
Yeah,
this is your recipe, mate. It's not his recipe.
Blatantly not his
I'm pretty sure the technicals are not their recipes. They're saying, oh, yeah, let's do this. And some junior food writer goes and...
Yeah, quite possibly. Would you make it again?
Nah.
Fair enough.
Nah. I'd make focaccia.
Yeah.
That's a bread type that we go to.
Yeah.
I think I'd rather... I definitely wouldn't make it with the stuff in it.
Yep.
And like you say, ciabatta is not the best bread type. I'd rather make a French loaf.
Yeah.
If I was doing something equivalent.
Yeah.
Okay. Final round was milk bread. Was that it?
Milk bread, yeah. Just makes me think of my grandma.
Really?
When I was poorly, my grandma used to look after me when I couldn't go to school, and she would make me toast on milk roll.
Oh.
So basically, to me, milk bread, I'm just like, bread that one has when one's poorly.
Yeah.
From one's grandma.
I'm not sure I've ever had it.
Fair enough.
It's just not a thing I even think of or can relate to anything. I don't know anything about it. So it was interesting to watch and see. Sometimes they were using a milk powder to get the milk aspect in it. Sometimes it was just pure milk instead of water, which I'm assuming changes it because milk is thinner, I think.
Burns quicker.
Okay, that's very fair. What stood out to you?
That it seemed a very soft and fluffy material for them to be making sculptures
right.
out of. I thought that was a bit harsh. It's what stood out to me the most out of all of it was how well it took food dye. That red octopus was a thing to behold. I mean, I thought the suckers on those octopus legs were amazing.
Yes.
I loved them.
The sculpture itself looked really good. When they showed a shot of it sliced, I'd just go, no, that's not something I'm eating.
Yeah.
It just looks awful.
It doesn't look like what we understand food as, and therefore our that's going to make me ill sensors come out. Because I was also like, not sure I fancy that.
No,
but it looked amazing.
Yeah, that was very good sculpture. Again, a mixed range of sculptures.
Yes.
It's really hard. There were times in the judging they were a bit harsh this week and making comments.
Yes.
Which the Bake Off every so often does, and it's just you're trying to be fun or funny and relaxed, and it comes across as a little bit mean.
I thought that especially in the judging of the ciabatta breadsticks.
Yeah,
I was like,
same.
oh, Paul, you're just being a bit snidey now, mate. Yeah.
And the comments about, is that 4.5 hours work?
Yeah.
I think is very fair. Especially because they then have people coming up and saying, well, I've made a basket and I've made all the stuff in the basket.
Yes.
Or I've made this display of things. And you go, yes, I can see the time that's gone into that. That other one,
not so much.
You can judge them against each other. I commented a couple of weeks ago about a really good bit of judging that I liked. And I liked that we saw a little bit more in the judging for the technical, where he said to Christelle, what were you thinking? Why did this bake go wrong? And we got to see her telling him, because I'm pretty sure that happens.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure they do discuss it in more depth, and I'm appreciative of seeing it. I liked her saying, I apologise.
Yeah.
You know, she has now learned a thing from that, so...
Yes.
Yeah, I hope this becomes a trend, that we see more of the actual judging.
Yeah, no, I agree, because you're right. They clearly have significantly longer conversations than those that we get the snippets of in the TV show. Yeah. So more of that would be good.
I could do with more of that and less of, the instructions just say bake. The instructions just say prove. Like, we know how technicals go in this show already. This week, Paul and Prue are going to judge this blind.
Really?
Like, are they? Are they? Really? And they're leaving the centre. They're really, how interesting. And what was the other one that keeps happening? There's something else that happens all the time. We're like, yeah, we know. Oh, Prue's thing of, these are so irregular, you know, if you got this and I got this, I'd be very upset. So, yeah, I'm sure there's a shorter way of saying that. Yes. You know, we know your one bit of shtick. Give us more.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
But yes, in the judging for the thing, taking us back to the milk bread, I thought they were very good in calling out people who hadn't spent enough time, but we got some of that more about, actually, this baker's got this bubble in it, or it's collapsed and concertinaed and so on. And again, it's got some of what we've seen over the last few seasons of evolving commentary and evolving scientific aspects of bread making.
Yeah.
So
I was like, teaching them what the issue is.
Yeah.
Which is good. I did feel that those people that had made a significantly sized loaf probably were doing themselves a favour.
Okay.
Obviously that wasn't the winner, but yeah, like, I guess I'm just thinking, where did Rashika go wrong? But I guess it was in so many ways. Just because there was no, and I know the birdcage was supposed to be the centerpiece, but there was nothing that felt like a centerpiece of what she did. Whereas there was the pig, there was the spatchcock chicken,
the baby.
Like, the baby. The baby's a bit disturbing. Yeah. Yeah,
and it felt even over and above that, there was no decoration to it. So had it come out looking perfect and standing up straight, there was then no sense she was going to paint it or wash it or do something to it. It was just going to be, I've constructed this thing in these shapes.
Yeah.
But this was not a shaped bread challenge.
No.
Where we've seen it before, make an animal out of whatever. This was a sculpture.
And she seems to have put like chocolate through the bread that she did in the nest. I bet it was delicious. But again, it felt like she'd focused on the wrong thing.
Yeah. Yes, that was a shame. But and I think Maggie found it hard because there was then another octopus to compare it to. And you go, yeah, one does look significantly better than the other.
Yeah.
And you can, again, you can see the effort that went into it.
Yeah.
Shame.
What would you have done?
Having never baked with milk bread, I'm not entirely sure. I think if we're saying now, knowing what I know now about milk bread and the weight of it, probably something like those ones that were sort of flat but lots of small things together.
Yeah.
I think clearly that's the thing you should know about milk bread is actually don't put too much weight on it.
Yeah.
That it's quite soft and condenses. So what? Because it was just a sculpture, wasn't it?
I think so, yeah.
There wasn't even a theme or anything to it.
No, it's just like... Yeah, I don't even remember what the theme was. Like, do a thing with milk bread.
Yeah, I think I probably would have gone, because it's always quite good when they do it, leaned into the illusion baking thing.
Yeah.
And done a tray of biscuits or a tray of gingerbread men that turn out their bread.
Yeah, nice.
But they look like they are, I've made them and they look like bourbons and hobnobs and custard creams or something.
Yeah.
But actually they're biscuit loaves or something.
Nice.
Maybe something along those lines.
Yeah.
What would you have done?
I think I would have done things that were of a certain size, because I think I know that Giuseppe's fruit and veg looked amazing, but I think it would have made my life easier to maybe do some slightly larger bakes. Right. So I think I'd have done a cat curled up on top of a cushion.
Oh, nice.
That's what I think I would have done.
Nice.
A bright red cushion that you would have refused to eat because
there's
too much food colouring in it.
And a nice little cat curled up on top of it.
And a nice little
That's
cat.
nice, because yes, it did seem like bread dough that you could shape.
Yes.
And that it would hold its shape. So yes, you could.
I could see having a sort of a slightly more rounded, squarish, or a squoval, as the girl at the nail salon told me my nails were shaped this week. Who knows what a squoval is?
Is that a square oval?
Apparently so.
Okay, right, got it.
Squoval. And then you could do like a biggish round for the main body, and then a smallish round for the head, and a tail.
Oh, you wouldn't do a large one that you then sculpt into?
No, I think I would have a really large one for the cat, and then I'd have a head and a body and a tail, and then I would sort of add the detail on afterwards.
Nice. I think the two who did the roast meats, that was a good way to go.
Absolutely.
It gave you both the opportunity for one big bake, but lots of small bakes you could do around it as well.
Yeah. And also, it meant that the animal didn't actually have to be like a live animal shape.
No, exactly.
Because your roasted pig and your chicken could be spatchcocked.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter so much if they look a little bit squished.
Squat. Yeah.
No, very clever.
Yeah. Any thoughts on the episode as a whole, on how everyone performed?
I thought it was a good episode as a whole. I think the top half and the bottom half are starting to be, for me, it feels like certainly the very bottom is feeling, I know who's coming out next. I feel that Jürgen wasn't able to get away with feats of engineering this week. Yeah,
bread is not so structured, which I was thinking this as we were baking. I think that's one of the reasons I don't like it so much.
Yeah.
Aside from it's really sticky and cleaning it up is horrible, and I don't like washing up things that have been bready and oily. But I like that I can go, this quantity of all the ingredients mixed in this way, cooked for this long, and you will get a tasty cake at the end of it. Bread is just so much more magic than science.
Which is why I like it.
Yeah.
I really like it. And I think I also put less pressure on myself to be perfect with my baking.
Okay.
I'm just like, it tastes good.
Tastes good. Result, 10 out of 10.
Yes. Whereas I think you want to control it.
Yes.
So to make sure that it's perfect by using science and control so that you can replicate it perfect every time.
The idea that the instructions have aspects such as 1 to 2 hours proving. Well, that's not a small difference. Yeah, the 15 to 20 minutes baking, I kind of get. That's okay. But and then the bit of rolling it out in the middle that was roll it into a rectangle. Well, how big a rectangle? Because you say then stretch them to 30 centimetres. So presumably it can't be 30 centimetres to start with.
Yeah.
But it has to be wide enough that I can get 18 cuts out of it. Because I did say cut it into 18. So...
I
don't like the lack of structure.
I won't make you bake it again.
Thank you.
But I will make you eat the focaccia again.
We do have a lot of it left, so we're never going to have to bake it again.
Anyone swinging by Godalming?
Yeah.
If you want some ciabatta breadsticks, give us a shout.
I'm interested that there are people that I think are very strong. I'm thinking particularly of Christelle. There was the bit about her cracklean.
Yeah.
And could have been baked and could have been a bit darker. And it makes me wonder, is there something coming up with cracklean? So this was her practicing and testing feedback on her cracklean.
I think she's very clever.
Is she gaming the system slightly? But at the same time, she's not pushing the top in the same way you look at Jürgen and you look at Giuseppe, both have been.
But she's confidently in the top half.
I would agree, but she wasn't in the technical. And I think some of her other bakes have been ever so slightly hit or miss. Like sometimes she absolutely hits and it works.
Yeah.
So I sort of feel like it will probably all come together for her, I hope. But I'm sort of interested to watch that. Like, clearly very capable, but also figuring it out.
Yeah.
And I'm also pleased that Lizzie did so well this week.
Yeah.
Lizzie actually had a very, very good week.
Very strong week.
And I feel like we had slightly less playing to the camera from her. Particularly because I noticed Maggie playing to the camera a lot.
Right.
And always making a joke and smiling and doing the thing, which is... But you go to others and they are talking sort of scientifically and in detail about what they're doing.
Yeah. Maggie would be very lucky not to go out next week. I think.
Yeah.
She's a competent baker, but this is, what's it, season
13?
13?
12?
12?
12. We must get this right one week.
Season 3 million.
Yeah.
But and people come in with a certain level of broader thoughts about what to do in their baking and techniques, and I think she's the sort of, this is how I've baked all my life, and she's very good at it, but she's reaching the end of her skill set. Yeah.
I think the things that are being asked of her, and it's almost a shame. I don't want to go down a stereotyping route, but we have seen this before with other bakers similar to her. Of they're very good at some very core things, and then when you ask them to do artistic, elaborate things from other countries or other techniques they've not tried before, they start coming unstuck because they've not practiced and been used to learning and picking up stuff. And
I think it's the artisticness, artistry, aesthetics, whatever word I'm looking for. But it's the turning the bread into the work of art for the showstopper that I think she's potentially finding it hardest.
Yeah. On top of the time pressures.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd be rubbish.
Yeah.
I would be rubbish in that tent. I would be having a right old strop under that time pressure.
And we saw it a little bit. A couple of them going like, "Who wants a breadstick?" Or this challenge is just rubbish. It's a waste of my time, and this kind of thing. And you think, this is people who are annoyed because they can see that the challenge is unfair because of the time.
Yeah.
Which we've said before, and I think they do it obviously they do it on purpose,
yes.
But they do it on purpose to see who can sink or swim.
And to create a bit of drama to make good TV. Because, I mean, come on, would it be good TV if you had 10 people in a tent who all produced 18 perfect ciabatta breadsticks? Oh, isn't that good, chaps?
I would like it every so often. I would like it if we could actually judge on the positive details of it. In some ways, what they do on the professionals, because they achieve what they're aiming for so often, that it comes down to whose idea was better, whose flavour combination was better, whose proving technique was better, something like that.
I think we get the space for that a bit more in the signature. Because it's up to, the individuals to a certain extent get to control how intricate they make their recipe, because they get to plan it beforehand.
Yeah.
I mean, the showstopper... It's a balancing act, isn't it? Like, if you make your design too simple, then you're going to get called out for that. Yep. If you make it too complicated, you're giving yourself too much work.
You don't have time for
that's a real balancing act. And it's 4.5 hours baking. Who's got the time in their life to practice? Let's say you're going to win.
Yeah.
And there's how many weeks of the show? 10 weeks of the show. So you've got 10 times at least 4.5 hours baking. Forget the signature, just for designing and planning the showstopper. I mean, that's, you could make like 6 months work out of that.
Yeah.
Forget your job.
Yeah.
Just dedicate yourself. Like, no one's got the time for that. No. So of course people are going to come on crop, because these are normal people. They're not like prime baking athletes who spend their life training for Bake Off.
And in the middle of all that, you've got 2 days where you are doing the show.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely. So
next week was desserts, which will be interesting to see. I have a feeling we might be making 2 batches of sticky toffee pudding.
It's not impossible. Or we could be a little bit controversial, and I could go make the malt loaf for one of the earlier weeks.
Could, yeah. Actually, because we have missed a couple of weeks. That would be good. You really want to make that malt loaf, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Do you just want malt loaf? Is that where we are?
I love malt loaf.
Do I just need to go and buy you some
I want
branded malt loaf?
I wouldn't say no, but I'm interested to see if homemade malt loaf has that stick to your teeth goodness that one gets from the branded malt loaf.
Okay. Well, we'll see what comes on Tuesday.
Yeah.
And see what the episode does. In the meantime, do check us out on Instagram, where we post all our pictures of our baking and our thoughts on it. So Instagram/EloquentGushing. And you can find me, I'm Instagram.com/MatthewVVose.
And you can find me, Instagram.com/KendoCat.
So we'll see you all next week. If you are baking, do drop us a note, tag us in any pictures, tag us in any comments. Let us know how you're finding all the bakes as you're attempting them as well.